to discuss it all here at Hofstra University, Republican strategist and CBSN political contributor Leslie Sanchez, Democratic strategist and CBSN political contributor Nomiki Konst, and national political reporter for Real Clear Politics, Huey-Burns. The program's brainpower and posture has now improved markedly. We do appreciate it. Leslie, I want to start with you. We have arrived. There will only be hours more discussion.
We're just waiting
about what we might see. So on the Trump campaign side of things, in these last hours, what either lines of attack would you be looking to hone? What things would you make sure your candidate did and said on that stage tonight?
Probably most critical is that he doesn't flub some of the big narratives on national security. He is going against somebody who is extremely strong and well-versed in all of the details. He has a lot of ground to talk about. He could talk about Benghazi or Libya or any of these other areas, but it's when he gets into those details that he's really on shaky ground. And I think that could prove to be the 1976 Gerald Ford moment where he really doesn't have a good command of what's happening globally. That's the misstep that's probably most critical.
Our Major Garrett said that a lot of the policy speeches from him tend to be things poured into the teleprompter by conservative think tanks. I mean, is that fairly accurate?
It's very accurate, and a lot of times with candidates who are not well versed, it takes so long to learn and have a good command of those issues that they're regurgitating like an echo chamber. You put it in and it kind of comes out and they repeat it like a parrot almost, the way they're trained to think about those issues. But the nuance is where you get in trouble. It's like talking about things, getting the names wrong. People will give Donald Trump a pass on that. They don't expect him to be an expert, but they expect him to be aware of the global theater and the stage, dramatic, dangerous stage we're in.
Meanwhile, Naomi, perhaps inversely for Hillary Clinton, a self-avowed policy wonk, there's been a lot of discussion about how high she needs to fly and not perhaps get too down into the weeds with regard to any one policy specific. If you're a Clinton campaign staffer today and you're able to say one or two things to the candidate before she steps out onto that stage, what would it be?
To say to her?
Yeah.
I think it would be to remind yourself of who you are, what you've done. You know, talk about your achievements. The fact that if talk about where we were 8 years ago under pre-Barack Obama, you know, how we were disgraced all over the world. Nobody wanted to have conversations with America. No other countries did. Well, guess who changed that? Secretary Hillary Clinton changed that. She went around and she flew around to 400 plus trips to different countries, almost every country in the world, and established those relationships again so that we're respected again. That is all at risk with Donald Trump on stage, who doesn't even know who the foreign leaders are, who doesn't understand the dynamics of what's happening in the Mideast, who uses inflamed rhetoric to incite ISIS and terrorist organizations. That's what's at risk here. And Hillary Clinton needs to own up on that, not go into his rabbit hole, not sink into his rhetoric, you know, completely deflect away. Obviously, policy is very important, but connecting it at a human level and really reinforcing the message that, are we better off than where we were 8 years ago? Yes. Do we want to continue and grow upon that? Absolutely. And Hillary Clinton is the person to do so, not Donald Trump.
Caitlin, the spectrum has arguably perhaps never been more vast between two major party candidates. And so we see huge differences on policy, on delivery, style, and yet we saw the numbers coming in. This is a statistical dead heat prior to the 90 minutes tonight. How to explain those numbers then, and what might 90 minutes do to them?
Right. Well, we're a very divided country, as we know. These are two of the most unpopular candidates we've ever had. Both have huge vulnerabilities. And when you look at the recent polls, trustworthiness and honesty still continue to haunt Hillary Clinton. Temperament, character of a president still remains Donald Trump's biggest vulnerability. And those are the two things that each, I think, have to address on some level tonight. Debates, there is always a question of how much they matter, and traditionally they can move the needle a couple of points. I think this time, however, that couple of points is a big deal. These are two candidates who are so different, not even on policy, but on personality, on character, on temperament, and those sorts of things. I think that will be the biggest display tonight, not like in 2012 where the two really went after each other on policy differences. And when you're thinking about 2012, I mean, Barack Barack Obama lost that first debate. Mitt Romney subsequently went up in the polls after that. You had 2 more debates after that. A lot of campaigning left to do. Debates, I think this one will make a big difference, but I do think that there's still a lot of time from now until November.
Interesting, a couple numbers that jump out at me. First of all, with regard to this debate, virtually 1/3 of registered voters are saying they are going to make their decision based on, in part, on what they see here tonight. Another number that really jumps out with regard to Hillary Clinton, Nomi, is the declining support with young voters. As a surrogate and a supporter of Bernie Sanders throughout the primary campaign, we have not seen Senator Sanders on the trail in support of Hillary Clinton as we thought perhaps we would. Certainly a piece was very publicly brokered. She did receive his endorsement. It felt as if it was a never Trump endorsement as much as anything. But where has the senator been, and how might he shore up what had been a big part of the Obama coalition and a voting bloc that they're going to have to turn out for success in November?
I think that Democrats traditionally rely on young voters in the last few weeks of the election. So we're not even there yet. You said we still have a long way to go with the debates. It's usually the final 2 weeks getting people registered to vote around the registration deadlines. I think that the Clinton campaign, is relying on that and is expecting the young voters to turn out. But this is a different cycle, mainly because there was a Bernie Sanders factor. Also because the majority of young people under the age of 35 and 40 are independent voters. So they need to get registered right now. And the case needs to be made why Hillary Clinton, it's not the lesser of two evils argument here, because I think a lot of young people do think it's a lesser of 2 evils argument. I think the argument is a completely different America versus an America that could be better, will be better if we have a Democratic Senate. And the only person who can do that, message that, I think the best person, is Bernie Sanders. But that is not on Bernie Sanders. That's on the Clinton campaign to bring him out there, take him on a college tour, take him across the country and make the case for why, the stakes are pretty high here. It's not going to be the socialist world that we all dreamed of, but it'll be a world that is similar to where we are today and can get better versus a completely different America under a President Trump.
After the last 15 months, we've seen
the nightmare of that's a nightmare. European socialism is a nightmare.
Well, it would seem the politics of expectation.
We lost that one.
After the 15 months we've seen, that seems a very dangerous game to play with regard to the Clinton campaign. Also, Leslie, very specifically, and as our social media maven, as much as anything on the panel.
Just follow us on stories.
In 2012, Twitter was still in its relative infancy. We saw 10 million tweets during that first debate. You can assume perhaps that number will be dwarfed tonight, and in real time, a narrative will be captured and frozen. They won't even wait to see how they did at the end of the 90 minutes. It could be 2, 3, 4 minutes in. A lot of younger voters watch television, will be watching this, streaming it. They'll watch it with multiple screens. What role, very, very pointedly, will social media play in tonight and then really the last 43 days of this campaign?
What's fascinating about that role, on Twitter, it's like cognoscenti, right? It's people talking to each other. It's reinforcing an idea. It's almost like a wildfire in that you see it move, but the thought pieces come afterward, actually in print or in the analysis that you see on video. What is fascinating are the clips that are going to be taken, the video that will circulate on Snapchat, Facebook, throughout Twitter. You'll see them in instant response. That's going to be more for the individuals who didn't see it themselves. That's going to be their takeaway. And more than anything, it just gets down to the basics. It's mano a mano, person to person. It's the email I get from my family, from your mother, your aunt, your grandfather. That will have more influence at the end of the day than any of the chatter that we hear on the web.
Caitlin's strategy, very important then tonight. And perhaps, and we've heard, the Clinton campaign has let it be known. Zingers have been practiced. One-liners have been workshopped. You could argue the Donald Trump campaign, to a degree, has been focused on that, with an emphasis on such things, 140 characters and fewer. When then do we expect, typically, traditionally, maybe it was the first 30 minutes or so where people were making up their minds, but certainly when to deploy, when to look to bait their opponent, is going to be a huge part of what we see here tonight.
I think absolutely. I think you have to have it right off the bat. People have short attention spans. This debate starts at 9 p.m. I think it's incumbent upon the candidates to really, get this going at the beginning. I think if Clinton can find a way to bait Donald Trump without overdoing it, that's a big challenge, right? To get him off his game a little bit in a way that exposes his vulnerabilities on temperament. And for his part, he needs to show, there's talk about, which Donald Trump is going to show up tonight, the more scripted, practiced one that we've seen on the stump recently, or the one that we've seen in the multitude of Republican Party debates, which shows up. And I think that we will be able to tell kind of at the beginning of this. But I think, as far as social media interactions go as well, a lot of young people are not necessarily watching TV in the same way that they were these days. They're following it on Twitter, they're following it the day after, or kind of in bits and pieces. And I think both campaigns recognize how the public is kind of absorbing all this information.
The one caveat I'd say to that is there's so many viewing parties planned. I think college viewing parties, young viewing parties, high school students viewing parties, even down to the grade school level. People are taking it very seriously, and because they don't necessarily have to have cable, they can just get on the web and see it on their phone. It's really having a different type of reaction. So I think, again, it's the conversation friends are having with each other as they see it, and then the video that they circulate, which will be the zingers that she's talking about.
And which will be what hundreds of millions of Americans are likely talking about 24 hours from now. Leslie, Nomiki, Caitlin, very much appreciate the time as always, guys.